My hands were still shaking from a 14-hour nursing shift as I sat in my freezing car. The phone screen lit up with a text from my stepmother saying the dinner table was full this year, so I could eat in the kitchen after serving, but she still expected me to cook the entire menu. I stared at the message, smelling the stale antiseptic on my scrubs. To them, I wasn't family. I was just free labor. My name is Allison Valdez, and at 32 years old, I felt less like a living, breathing woman and more like a machine that had been run into the ground, its gears grinding against rust and exhaustion. The engine of my Honda Civic rattled as it fought against the freezing temperatures, a mechanical cough that mirrored the tightness in my own chest. Outside, the world had been erased by white. A heavy, relentless snow was burying the employee parking lot of Brightline Regional Hospital, transforming the rows of cars into anonymous white mounds. It was the kind of winter night in the suburbs of Cleveland that felt personal, as if the sky itself was trying to press the weight of the world down upon you. I sat motionless in the driver's seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel not to drive, but just to hold on to something solid. The shift had been 14 hours long, 14 hours of standing, running, lifting, and apologizing for things that were not my fault. My nursing scrubs felt heavy on my skin, a second layer of fatigue clinging to me. They smelled of the hospital, that unique, suffocating cocktail of industrial antiseptic, stale sweat, and the lukewarm coffee I had spilled on my thigh 5 hours ago. The heater was blasting at full power, but the air coming out was barely lukewarm, doing little to combat the chill seeping through the floorboards. Every breath I exhaled bloomed into a gray fog on the windshield, obscuring the view of the exit sign. It felt like I was sealed inside a box, a capsule of cold air and silence floating in the middle of a snowstorm. I closed my eyes, listening to the rhythmic thrum of the engine and the soft, wet patter of snowflakes hitting the glass. My lower back throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, a reminder of the 300-pound patient I had helped transfer twice that night. I was tired. It was a bone-deep, marrow-sucking kind of tired that sleep alone would never fix. I just wanted to dissolve. I wanted to turn off the engine, recline the seat, and let the snow cover me completely until I was just another quiet bump in the landscape. Then, the vibration started. It was a harsh, buzzing sound against the hard plastic of the center console, cutting through the silence like a drill. I flinched, my eyes snapping open. The screen of my phone lit up, casting a sickly blue glow over the dashboard. The name of the group chat scrolled across the notification banner, Valdez Morris Christmas Plans. My stomach tightened. It was an automatic physiological response, like a dog cowering at the sound of a raised voice. I stared at the phone, my heart rate kicking up a notch, betraying the calm I was trying to maintain. I knew what this was. It was mid-December. The logistics of the perfect family holiday were in full swing, in any normal family. A notification like this might bring a sense of warmth, or perhaps a mild annoyance about who was bringing the pie. In my family, it was a summons. I rubbed my temples, trying to push back the headache that was blooming behind my eyes. They were probably just asking what time I would be arriving to start the prep work. That was my role. I was the logistics manager, the sous chef, the cleaner, and the scapegoat, all wrapped up in one convenient package. I reached out, my fingers stiff from the cold, and unlocked the phone. The message was from Vivian, my stepmother. I read the words once, then I read them again. The blue light seemed to sharpen, burning the text into my retinas. Vivian, just a heads up for the schedule this year. We are inviting Tyler's in-laws to host the main dinner, so the dining room is going to be at capacity. The table is completely full. You and your boyfriend, if he decides to come, can eat in the kitchen after the main service is done, but I still need you to arrive by 8 in the morning to handle the full menu like every year. I want everything hot and ready for the guests by 6. I sat there, the breath trapped in my throat. There was no greeting, no, hello, Allison, no, how was your shift, no, we would love to see you. There was just the cold, hard logistics of my exclusion. Eat in the kitchen. The words echoed in my head, bouncing around the small cabin of the car. After the main service is done, She was not inviting a daughter to Christmas dinner. She was scheduling the help. I could picture the scene perfectly. The dining room table extended to its full length, covered in the heavy cream linen tablecloths that I would have to iron, the good crystal wine glasses catching the candlelight, Vivian at the head of the table, laughing that practiced, tinkling laugh of hers, charming Tyler's new in-laws, playing the role of the benevolent matriarch. And me? I would be behind the swinging door, standing over the sink, scraping gravy off the plates they had just eaten from, eating leftovers cold because I was too exhausted to heat them up. My position was set. It was not even a negotiation. It was a default setting. Allison creates the magic. Allison does not get to enjoy it. Before I could even process the humiliation rising in my throat like bile, the phone buzzed again. A second message slid into view. This one from my father. Greg. Dad, also, do not forget the Christmas gift for me. I want that new model of the smartwatch we talked about. I sent you the direct link yesterday. Make sure it is the Pro version. I stared at the two messages stacked on top of each other, one telling me I was not good enough to sit at the table, the other demanding a $400 gadget as a tribute. The audacity was so pure, so unadulterated, that it almost felt like a physical blow. My gaze dropped from the phone screen to my own wrist. The sleeve of my scrub top had ridden up slightly, revealing the pale skin of my forearm. There, fading but still visible in the harsh blue light, was a yellowish-green bruise, the shape of a thumb. It had happened 3 weeks ago. I touched the spot with my other hand, and the phantom pain flared up, sharp and immediate. I remembered the smell of burning sugar. I had been in their kitchen, trying to rescue a batch of cookies Vivian had distracted me from, and she had come in, screaming about the smoke. She had grabbed my arm, her nails digging into the soft flesh, and shoved me hard against the pantry door handle. "You are useless!" she had screamed, her face twisted into a mask of pure venom, so different from the smiling face she wore in public. "You are just trash living off this house. Look at you, nearly 30 years old and still ruining my kitchen." Then came the slap. It wasn't a theatrical slap. It was a hard, stinging crack across my cheekbone that snapped my head to the side. I remembered the shock of it more than the pain. I was a grown woman. I was a registered nurse who managed life and death situations. I paid my own rent. I paid my own bills. And yet, there I stood, freezing in place, while my stepmother struck me across the face. The worst part had not been the slap. The worst part had been the audience. 2 of my aunts were in the living room. They had heard the scream. They had heard the slap. I had looked up, eyes watering, meeting their gaze through the open doorway. They had looked down. They had sipped their tea. They had pretended they heard nothing. Trash. The word hung in the freezing air of the car. Trash living off this house. That was how they saw me. It did not matter that I had moved out years ago. It did not matter that I sent money home whenever Dad complained about bills. It did not matter that I cooked every holiday meal, organized every birthday, and acted as the buffer for every family conflict. To them, I was just a resource. I was a utility. Like electricity or running water. You do not thank the electricity for working. You only curse it when it goes out. And you certainly do not invite the electricity to sit at the dinner table. A wave of exhaustion crashed over me, heavier than the snow piling up on the roof of the car. It would be so easy to just do it. That was the terrifying part. The path of least resistance was so well worn in my brain, it would be so easy to type back. "Okay, Mom, I will be there at 8. Dad, I ordered the watch." It would be easy to buy the groceries with my own money, to stand in the kitchen for 10 hours, to eat the cold turkey by the sink, to smile when they ignored me, to accept my place as the invisible, grateful daughter. My thumb hovered over the call button. I could call them now. I could apologize for not responding sooner. I could explain that my shift was hard, but I was happy to help. I could beg for a seat at the table, maybe a folding chair in the corner. Please, just let me be part of the family. The tip of my finger trembled. I looked out at the windshield again. The frost was creeping inward. narrowing my field of vision. I was 32 years old. I spent my nights keeping strangers alive. I held the hands of dying men who had no one else. I managed complex medication titrations. I commanded the respect of doctors and surgeons. And yet, for a smartwatch and a plate of cold leftovers, I was about to sell the last scrap of my dignity. Trash. Something inside me clicked. It wasn't a loud snap. It was a quiet, almost imperceptible shift, like a key turning in a rusty lock. I looked at the messages again. The table is completely full. No, I whispered. The sound of my own voice startled me. It sounded raspy, foreign. I did not press the call button. I did not type a reply. I did not send the confirmation emoji. Instead, I slid my thumb upward and swiped the notification away. Then, I pressed the side button of the phone, plunging the screen into darkness. The black mirror of the phone reflected my own face back at me. Pale, dark circles under the eyes, lips chapped from the dry hospital air, but there was something else in the reflection. Something around the set of the jaw that hadn't been there a minute ago. A dangerous question began to unfurl in my mind, seductive and terrifying. What if I just didn't? What if I didn't buy the turkey? What if I didn't wake up at 6 a.m. to drive over there? What if I didn't buy the watch? What if, for the first time in my entire life, I simply refused to play the role they had written for me? What if the trash decided to take itself out, right out of their lives? The thought made my heart hammer against my ribs, faster than fear, faster than panic. It felt like adrenaline. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff and wondering what it would feel like to jump, not to fall, but to fly. I put the car into gear. The transmission clunked, a familiar, jarring sound. Usually, when I left the hospital after a shift like this, I would drive toward the highway, toward my father's house in the suburbs, to drop off laundry or pick up a list of errands Vivian had left for me. It was a reflex. But tonight, the steering wheel felt different in my hands. I pulled out of the parking spot, the tires crunching loudly over the fresh, untouched snow. I reached the exit of the lot, where the road split. Left went toward the sprawling subdivisions where my father and Vivian lived in their perfect, manicured house. Right went toward the city, toward my small, drafty one-bedroom apartment that smelled like my own cheap candles and silence. I did not signal. I just turned the wheel to the right. The car skidded slightly on a patch of ice, but I corrected it with a steady hand. I drove away from the hospital, away from the expectation, away from the kitchen where I was expected to eat like a servant. I drove into the whiteout of the storm, the darkness swallowing the taillights behind me. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do when Christmas morning came. I didn't know how I would handle the fallout, the screaming phone calls, the guilt trips that Vivian would launch like missiles. But as I watched the road stretch out before me, empty and white and open, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to that dinner. And for the first time in years, the cold air filling the car didn't feel like a trap. It felt like fresh air. I unlocked the door to my apartment, the silence inside hitting me like a physical weight. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of the hospital and the suffocating tension of the car ride. I threw my keys into the small ceramic bowl by the door and collapsed onto my beige sofa without even taking off my coat. The apartment was cold, but it was a clean kind of cold, untouched by the frantic energy of my father's house. My eyes wandered to the empty space on the wall where a family photo might hang in a normal home. I did not have any. As I sat there, the adrenaline from my decision to skip Christmas began to fade, replaced by the heavy, dark tide of memory. It was funny how one text message could unlock a vault I had spent years trying to seal shut. It wasn't just about this Christmas. It was about the slow, methodical erasure of Allison Valdez, a process that had started 17 years ago. I closed my eyes, and suddenly, I was 15 years old again. That was the year my father, Greg, brought Vivian home. My mother had passed away when I was very young, and for years, it had just been Dad and me. Then came Vivian. She was dazzling in a way that felt foreign to our quiet suburban life. She worked in high-end event planning and social networking, a woman who knew exactly how to drape a shawl and how to command a room with a tilt of her chin. In the beginning, I was enchanted. I admit that. I was a teenage girl starving for a maternal figure, and Vivian played the part of the perfect stepmother with Oscar-worthy precision. She took me to the mall for shopping sprees, buying me dresses that were slightly too expensive and telling me I had potential. She would link her arm through mine when we ran into neighbors at the grocery store in Beam, introducing me as our daughter. It felt like I had been upgraded. I thought we were building a family. I did not realize I was just being groomed for a role in her production. The mask slipped for the first time when I was 18. I was in my senior year of high school, deep in the trenches of studying for my entrance exams for nursing school. I had been up until 3 a.m. every night, fueled by caffeine and the desperate need to get a scholarship. Vivian had decided to host a networking mixer at our house for her colleagues. It was a Wednesday night. She came into my room without knocking, holding a tray of appetizers. "Allison, honey," she said, her voice sweet but brisk. "The catering staff is one person short. I need you to put on that black dress and handle the tray service and the door greeting, just for 4 or 5 hours." I looked up from my biology textbook, my eyes burning. "Vivian, I can't. My final entrance exam is tomorrow morning. I need to review the anatomy section." The sweetness vanished from her face so fast, it was like a light switch being flicked off. "Excuse me?" "I have to study," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "This determines if I get into the program." She stepped forward, grabbed my arm, and yanked me out of the chair. Before I could even find my balance, she dragged me into the hallway, away from the guests who were starting to arrive downstairs, and shoved me toward the kitchen. "You ungrateful little brat," she hissed. Her face was inches from mine. Her perfume, something heavy and floral, suddenly smelling like poison. "I put a roof over your head. I buy your clothes. And you can't give me one evening? You are selfish. You are absolutely useless." Then she slapped me. It was the first time. It wasn't a playful tap. It was a hard, stinging blow that left my ear ringing. I stood there, stunned, my hand flying to my cheek. I was 18. I was an adult legally. But in that hallway, I felt like a small, frightened child. My father walked around the corner just as it happened. He saw me holding my face. He saw Vivian's heaving chest. "Dad!" I gasped, waiting for him to step in, to yell, to tell her to get out. Greg looked at me, then at Vivian. He sighed, a sound of deep, weary resignation. "Allison," he said, his voice low, "you know your stepmother has a temper. She is stressed about the party. Don't argue with her. Just help her out, okay? Keep the peace." He walked away. He walked right past me and went downstairs to pour himself a drink. That moment broke something fundamental between my father and me. He hadn't just failed to protect me, he had validated her violence. He had taught Vivian that there were no consequences for hurting me, and he had taught me that my safety mattered less than his comfort. From that night on, the dynamic was set in stone. The daughter label was purely for show. Behind closed doors, I was the staff. As the years went by, every holiday became a grueling marathon of labor: Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, and especially the birthday parties for Tyler, Vivian's son from her previous marriage. Tyler was 3 years younger than me, a golden boy who could do no wrong. While Tyler sat in the living room opening expensive gifts, gaming consoles, designer sneakers, cars, I was in the kitchen, sweating over a hot stove. Vivian was a master of branding. She would invite 30 people over, presenting a spread of gourmet food that would make Martha Stewart jealous. "Oh, Vivian, this roast is divine," the guests would exclaim. And Vivian, holding a glass of Chardonnay, would smile modestly and say, "Oh, it is a labor of love. I have been planning the menu for weeks." She never mentioned that I had peeled 50 pounds of potatoes. She never mentioned that I had been up since 4 a.m. basting the turkey because she didn't want to ruin her manicure. If I happened to walk into the dining room to refill a water pitcher, She would smile at the guests and say, "Allison loves cooking so much. It is her hobby. She gets so much joy out of helping. Don't you, sweetie?" It was a brilliant trap. If I denied it, I looked like a sullen, ungrateful daughter ruining the mood. If I agreed, I consented to my own exploitation. So I would force a smile, nod, and retreat back to the steam and grease of the kitchen. The walls of their house were a testament to my erasure. By the time I was 22, the hallway was lined with framed professional photographs. There was Vivian, radiant in silk. There was Greg, looking distinguished. There was Tyler, front and center, looking like the heir to a throne. And me? In most pictures, I wasn't there. I was the one holding the camera, or I was back at the house prepping the venue while they took portraits in the park. In the few group shots where I appeared, I was always on the edge of the frame, half obscured by a plant or standing awkwardly to the side, usually holding a platter or a coat. I looked like what I was, the help that had accidentally wandered into the frame. There was only one person who saw the truth. Grandma Margaret, my father's mother, was a sharp-witted woman who was slowly losing her mobility, but never her eyesight. She saw everything. She saw the way Vivian snapped her fingers at me to clear the table. She saw the way my father looked down at his plate when Vivian berated me for a spot on a glass. After every big dinner, when the guests were drunk and loud in the living room, Grandma Margaret would make her way slowly into the kitchen where I was washing mountains of dishes. She would lean against the counter, watching me scrub. "Here," she would whisper, pressing a folded bill into the pocket of my apron or jeans. Usually, it was $50, sometimes $20. It wasn't about the amount. "Grandma, you don't have to," I would say, trying to give it back. "Take it," she would hiss, her eyes fierce. "This is for your work. You are not a servant in this house, Allison, even if they treat you like one. You save this. You hear me?" She was the only lifeline I had, the only voice that told me I wasn't crazy. But even Grandma couldn't stop the physical toll. I remembered a specific night when I was 24. I was working my second year as a nurse, exhausted after 3 12-hour shifts in a row. It was February, and a blizzard was hammering Cleveland. I was asleep in my apartment. I had moved out by then, thank God, when my phone rang at midnight. It was Vivian. "You need to come over, now," she demanded. "What? Is Dad okay?" I sat up, panic seizing my chest. "Your father is fine. We just finished the Super Bowl party, and the caterers left a mess in the sunroom. There is wine on the white carpet and food everywhere. I have a brunch meeting here at 9 tomorrow. I need it spotless." "Vivian, I am sleeping. I have work tomorrow night. Call a cleaning service." "Don't you dare get an attitude with me," she screamed. "After everything we did for you, get over here, or I will tell your father you are refusing to help the family in a crisis." I drove over, like a fool. I drove over in the snow because I was terrified of the conflict, terrified of losing the little connection I had left with my dad. When I got there, the house smelled of stale beer and pizza. Vivian was pacing in the kitchen, tipsy and angry. I started cleaning, on my hands and knees scrubbing red wine out of the carpet. At one point, I stood up to get more paper towels, and I muttered, "I can't believe I'm doing this." Vivian heard me. She spun around, her eyes glassy with rage. "What did you say?" I said I'm tired. "Vivian, I am a nurse, not a maid." She lunged at me. It wasn't a slap this time. She shoved me with both hands, hard. I stumbled back, losing my footing on the slick kitchen tile. My left side slammed into the solid oak cabinetry, and my arm cracked against the granite countertop handle. Pain exploded down my side. I cried out, sliding to the floor, clutching my arm. Vivian stood over me, breathing hard. For a second, she looked scared. Then, the mask slid back into place. "Look what you made me do," she spat. "You are so clumsy, always tripping over your own feet." My father walked in a moment later, drawn by the noise. He saw me on the floor, holding my arm which was already beginning to swell. He saw Vivian fixing her hair. "What happened?" he asked. looking at Vivian, not me. Allison slipped, Vivian said smoothly. She was rushing around. It was a small accident. She is fine. I looked at my dad. She shoved me, I said, my voice trembling with shock. Dad, she pushed me into the counter. Greg looked at the bruise forming on my arm. Then he looked at his wife. Vivian is just stressed about the carpet. Allison, he said, rubbing his forehead. It was an accident. Let's not make it a big deal. Do you need some ice? That was it. Let's not make it a big deal. I left that night with a bruise that turned purple and black and stayed for 2 weeks. I told my coworkers I had walked into a doorframe, the classic lie of the battered woman. I should have cut them off then. I should have changed my number and never looked back. But Vivian had one final weapon she used to keep me on the hook. Grandma Margaret. As Grandma got older and her heart began to fail, Vivian appointed herself the gatekeeper. If I didn't answer Vivian's texts instantly, suddenly I wasn't allowed to visit Grandma because she was resting. If I refused to cook for a dinner, Vivian would sigh and say, "Well, I guess we will have to cancel the lunch with Grandma. She will be so heartbroken. You know, stress is bad for her heart. Do you want to be the reason she gets sick?" She held my dying grandmother hostage to ensure my compliance. It was during one of those rare, stolen visits that the seed of my future was planted, though I didn't know it at the time. It was about 6 months before the Christmas where I finally snapped. Grandma was frail, sitting in her favorite armchair by the window, a blanket over her legs. Vivian had gone out to get her nails done, leaving me to watch Grandma, which was the only reason I was allowed to be there alone. Grandma gestured for me to come closer. Her hands, paper-thin and shaking, reached under the cushion of her chair. "Allison," she whispered, her voice raspy, "take this." She pulled out a small, polished, wooden box. It was no bigger than a deck of cards, the wood dark and smooth from years of handling. "What is this, Grandma?" I asked, reaching out to take it. It felt surprisingly heavy. "Shh," she hissed, glancing at the door as if Vivian might materialize through the wood. "Do not open it here, and do not tell your father. Definitely do not tell her." I slipped the box into my purse, my heart racing. "Why? What is it?" Grandma looked at me, her eyes clear and sharp, stripping away the fog of age for a brief moment. "Insurance," she said. "There will come a day when you have had enough. Allison, I see it. You are strong, but everyone breaks eventually. When that day comes, you will need this." She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "You are a good girl. You deserved better than this house, but you remember this. Blood does not make you a servant." I took the box home that day and put it in the back of my closet, buried under a stack of old textbooks. I didn't open it. I was too scared, too tired, too busy trying to survive the next shift and the next family crisis. I told myself it was just trinkets, maybe some old jewelry she wanted me to have. I didn't know then that the small wooden box was a loaded gun, and Grandma Margaret had just placed it in my hand, waiting for me to pull the trigger. Now, sitting in my silent apartment on this snowy night, having finally refused the summons, I felt a strange pull. The memory of Grandma's voice was louder than the silence. "When that day comes, you will need this." I looked toward my bedroom closet. The day had come. The house I grew up in, my grandmother's house, sat at the end of a long, winding driveway lined with ancient oak trees. But as I pulled up that evening, 10 minutes late, the house didn't look like the warm, slightly cluttered sanctuary of my childhood. It looked like a stage set. Vivian had taken over the management of the property recently, claiming Grandma was too frail to handle the upkeep, and the transformation was jarring. Floodlights washed the brick facade in a stark, aggressive brightness, and the wreath on the door was so large and perfectly symmetrical it looked artificial. I checked the dashboard clock, 7:10 in the evening. I was 10 minutes late, just 10 minutes. I had spent the last 12 hours at the hospital, and right at the change of shift, a patient, a 40-year-old father of 2, had coded. I had stayed to help run the code, to handle the family, to do the paperwork that couldn't wait. I was exhausted, my feet throbbing in my heels, my hair hurriedly brushed into a bun in the hospital parking lot. In the back seat sat 3 boxes of homemade pastries I had stayed up until 2 in the morning baking 2 nights ago. Because Vivian had insisted that store-bought is an insult to the guests. I took a deep breath, grabbed the boxes, and walked to the door. I could hear the hum of conversation and the clinking of glass from inside. The pre-Christmas dinner was Vivian's way of showing off her social circle. It wasn't about family, it was about Tyler's friends, Vivian's business partners, and a few token relatives to make it look legitimate. I pushed the door open. The warmth hit me first, smelling of pine needles and expensive catering. Vivian was standing in the foyer, holding a crystal champagne flute, laughing at something a man in a gray suit was saying. She looked immaculate in a velvet emerald dress, her hair coiffed into a stiff, perfect helmet. When she saw me, the smile didn't leave her face, but her eyes went dead. It was a look I knew well, the freeze before the burn. "Excuse me one moment," she said to the man, her voice dripping with charm. "My stepdaughter has finally decided to join us." She walked over to me, her heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood. She didn't stop until she was uncomfortably close, her perfume, heavy gardenia, cloying in my nose. Without a word, she gripped my upper arm, her fingers digging into the soft flesh through my sweater, and steered me sharply toward the kitchen door. "Smile," she hissed through her teeth, waving at a cousin across the room. "Don't you dare look miserable." She shoved me through the swinging kitchen door. The noise of the party cut off instantly, replaced by the frantic clatter of the catering staff. The kitchen was hot, filled with steam and the smell of roasting meat. Vivian released my arm with a shove that sent me stumbling slightly against the stainless steel prep table. 10 minutes, she said, her voice low and trembling with rage. "You are 10 minutes late." "I had a patient code. Vivian," I said, setting the pastry boxes down. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering. I couldn't leave. Someone was dying. "I don't care if the president was dying," she spat, stepping closer. "I have a schedule. The appetizers were supposed to cycle out 5 minutes ago, and I needed you here to manage the transition because the catering lead is an idiot. You are selfish. Allison, you are always so selfish." I looked at her. I was 32 years old. I saved lives for a living. I paid my taxes. And here I was, being dressed down by a woman who had never worked a 14-hour shift in her life. Something inside me, the same thing that had flickered in the car that snowy night, tightened. "I am not the catering manager," I said. The words came out calm, matter of fact. "I am a guest, and I brought the dessert you asked for, even though I have worked 60 hours this week." The silence in the kitchen was sudden. 2 caterers, young guys in black vests, stopped plating the salads and looked up. They had never heard me talk back to her. Vivian's face went blotchy. The mask of the perfect hostess cracked, revealing the ugly, snarling thing underneath. "Excuse me? What did you just say to me?" "I said I am not your employee," I repeated, louder this time. "I am tired. Vivian, I am happy to join the dinner, but I am not going to run the kitchen for you tonight." Vivian let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She looked around the kitchen, as if seeking an audience for my insolence. Then she looked back at me, her eyes narrowing into slits. She stepped forward, invading my personal space, using her height and her heels to loom over me. "You think you are someone, don't you?" she sneered. Her voice was rising now, carrying toward the door that a waiter had just propped open to carry a tray out. People in the hallway could hear. "You think because you wipe sick people for a living you are better than this family? Let me tell you something. You are nothing." She poked a manicured finger into my chest. "You live in a dump. You have no husband. You have no money. You are only here because I allow it. You are trash, Allison. You are trash living off the scraps of this house." The word hung in the air. Trash. I saw movement in the hallway. My Aunt Linda and 2 of Tyler's friends had stopped near the door, their drinks halfway to their mouths, staring into the kitchen. They heard it. They heard her call a grown woman trash. I looked Vivian in the eye. I don't live off this house. I haven't taken a dime from you in 10 years. The defiance was too much for her. The vein in her forehead pulsed. Without a second of hesitation, she drew her hand back and swung. Crack! The sound was sickeningly loud, like a dry branch snapping. Her palm connected with my left cheekbone with the full force of her body weight. My head whipped to the side. The sting was immediate and blinding, radiating from my ear down to my jaw. I stumbled back, catching myself on the edge of the counter, my hand flying to my face. I stood there, stunned. The kitchen was dead silent. The caterers were frozen, eyes wide. I slowly turned my head back to look at her. My cheek felt like it was on fire. I wasn't a child. I wasn't a teenager acting out. I was a grown woman, standing in her grandmother's kitchen, and my stepmother had just assaulted me. Vivian was breathing hard, her hands still raised slightly, her chest heaving. For a split second, I saw a flash of fear in her eyes. Not regret, but fear that she had gone too far in front of witnesses. "Oh my God," a voice whispered from the doorway. I looked over. Aunt Linda was covering her mouth. Behind her, my father, Greg, was pushing his way through the small crowd that had gathered. He walked into the kitchen, looking from Vivian to me. He saw the red handprint blossoming on my pale skin. He saw the tears of shock welling in my eyes. He saw Vivian, flustered but defiant. "Dad," I choked out, my voice trembling. "She just hit me." Greg looked at me. Then he looked at the open door, at the guests whispering in the hallway. He looked at Vivian, who immediately dissolved into a performance. "She was screaming at me! Greg!" Vivian cried, her voice pitching up into a fake sob. "She was getting in my face. I felt threatened." It was a lie so bold it took my breath away. I hadn't moved an inch toward her. I waited. I waited for him to yell. I waited for him to tell her to get out. I waited for him to be my father. Greg let out a long sigh, adjusting his tie. He stepped between us, but he didn't look at me with concern. He looked annoyed. Okay, he said, waving his hands as if shooing away a fly. "Lower your voices. Everyone can hear you." "She hit me, Dad," I repeated, staring at him. "She slapped me in the face." "Allison, please," he said, his voice tight. "Vivian is under a lot of pressure tonight. You know how she gets when the schedule goes off. You shouldn't have provoked her." I felt the blood drain from my face. The pain in my cheek was nothing compared to the cold knife twisting in my gut. I provoked her? By existing? By being 10 minutes late? "Stop it," Greg hissed, leaning in close to me. "Don't make a scene. Allison, we have important guests here. Tyler's future in-laws are in the other room. Just go wash your face, put some makeup on, and apologize to your mother for upsetting her so we can eat." "Apologize." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. I didn't see my father anymore. I saw a weak, hollow man who would sell his own daughter's dignity for a quiet evening. "I am not apologizing," I whispered. "Then just go fix your face," he snapped, turning his back on me to comfort Vivian, who was now dabbing at dry eyes with a napkin. "Everyone, it is fine," he called out to the hallway with a strained smile. "Just a little kitchen mishap. Please, take your seats." I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I didn't go to the dining room. I walked straight to the small powder room under the stairs and locked the door. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely turn the tap on. I splashed cold water on my face, but the heat wouldn't go away. I looked up at the mirror. The mark was undeniable. 4 distinct red fingers were printed across my cheek, the skin already starting to puff up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling, but my mind was suddenly icy cold. This wasn't a family dispute. This was assault. I held the phone up and took a photo, then another. I turned my face to catch the light, documenting the swelling, the redness, the timestamp, 7:25 p.m. I stared at the photo on the screen. It wasn't a selfie. It was evidence. A knock came at the door. "Allison?" It was Aunt Linda. "Dinner is being served. Are you coming out?" I took a deep breath. If I left now, they would say I was being dramatic. They would say I ruined Christmas. They would spin the story that I had a breakdown and ran away. "I will be right there," I said. I applied a thick layer of foundation over the bruise. It didn't hide the swelling, but it dulled the redness. I fixed my hair. I straightened my spine. When I walked into the dining room, everyone was seated. The conversation lulled for a second as I entered, eyes darting to my face, then quickly looking away. There was no seat set for me at the main table. A folding chair had been squeezed in at the corner, near the kitchen door, separated from the rest of the family by a gap. I sat down. Vivian was at the head of the table, smiling radiantly, holding a glass of wine. She looked composed, perfect, as if she hadn't just struck a human being 5 minutes ago. "I want to propose a toast," she said, her voice musical. "To family, to being together, and to my wonderful husband and son, who make all this possible." "Hear, hear," the guests chorused. Nobody mentioned me. Nobody looked at me. The caterers brought out the food I was supposed to have cooked but refused, and placed plates in front of everyone. Except one person. From the far end of the table, Grandma Margaret was watching me. She was sitting in her wheelchair, a blanket over her lap. She hadn't raised her glass for the toast. Her gray eyes were locked on my face, scanning the heavy makeup on my left cheek. She saw the swelling. She saw the way I was holding my jaw rigid. Her eyes filled with a profound, devastating sadness. She looked from me to Vivian, and then to her son, Greg, who was laughing at a joke, oblivious. Grandma's hand gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. She knew. She had heard the yell. She knew exactly what had happened. I tried to smile at her, a tiny, reassuring twitch of my lips, but she didn't smile back. She looked angry. The dinner dragged on for 2 hours. I ate nothing. I sat there, a ghost in my own family, listening to Vivian brag about the dessert, my dessert, and accepting compliments for the lovely atmosphere. When the coffee was served, I stood up. "I am leaving," I said quietly. "Already?" Greg asked, frowning. "We haven't opened the gifts." "I have a shift in the morning," I lied. "Good night." I didn't look at Vivian. I walked out of the dining room, grabbed my coat, and walked out into the biting cold of the December night. The air hit my face like a blessing, numbing the throb in my cheek. I got into my car, my hands still shaking, and locked the doors. I sat there for a moment, staring at the lit-up house. It looked beautiful from the outside. Inside, it was rotten. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway, leaving the tire tracks in the snow. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I felt something else. A cold, hard resolve hardening in my chest like concrete. I was halfway to the highway when my phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down, expecting a text from Greg telling me I was rude for leaving early, but the name on the screen made my breath hitch. Grandma calling. I pulled over to the shoulder of the road. Turning on my hazards, I picked up the phone. "Grandma?" "Allison." Her voice came through the speaker, weak and breathy, but urgent. "Are you driving?" I pulled over. "I am okay, Grandma." There was a pause, and I heard her take a ragged breath. "I saw," she whispered. "I saw your face, and I heard what that woman called you." "It's okay, Grandma," I said, fighting the sudden sting of tears. "I'm fine." "It is not okay." Her voice cracked, rising in a way I hadn't heard in years. "Listen to me, Allison. Listen to me closely." "I am listening." "You are not trash," she said, emphasizing every word. "You are my granddaughter. You are a Valdez. Do not let them say that word to you ever again. Do not let them make you believe it." "I won't," I said, my voice breaking. "I am tired, Allison," she said, her voice dropping to a murmur. "I am so tired of watching this, but I need you to promise me something." "Anything." "When the time comes, don't be kind," she said. It was a strange thing for a grandmother to say. "Be smart, be strong, but don't be kind. They rely on your kindness to hurt you. Stop giving it to them." "I promise," I whispered. "Good," she said. "Now go home and check the box. Not tonight, but soon." The line went dead. I sat in the dark car on the side of the highway, the hazard lights clicking rhythmically. Tick, tock, tick, tock. I touched my cheek again. It was tender. Be smart. Don't be kind. I looked at the phone in my hand, at the photo I had taken in the bathroom. The evidence. I put the car back in gear and drove onto the highway. The tears didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange clarity. The Allison who begged for scraps of affection was gone. She had been slapped out of existence in that kitchen. The woman driving the car was someone new. Someone who was done being a victim. Grandma was right. It was time to stop being kind. It was time to be smart. The decline happened faster than any of us expected. February in Cleveland was a brutal, gray beast, and inside the cardiac wing of the hospital, a different hospital from the one where I worked, the air felt heavy with impending loss. Grandma Margaret had been admitted for congestive heart failure. Her heart, which had beaten steadily through 80 years of life, through the loss of her husband and the slow estrangement of her family, was finally too tired to keep the rhythm. I spent every spare minute I had in that room. I would finish a 12-hour shift at Brightline, change out of my scrubs into jeans and a sweater, and drive 20 minutes to sit by her bedside. I became a ghost between two hospitals, living on vending machine coffee and 3 hours of sleep. It wasn't a burden. It was the only place I felt real. I would sit on the edge of her bed, carefully avoiding the IV lines, and brush her thin silver hair. I rubbed lotion into her hands, which had become paper dry and translucent. I adjusted her pillows with the practiced efficiency of a nurse, but with the tenderness of a granddaughter. We didn't talk much. She was often too breathless to speak, the oxygen mask hissing softly over her face, but she would squeeze my hand, her eyes tracking my movements with a look of profound gratitude. But outside that room, a different story was being written. I walked out into the hallway one evening to get water and heard Vivian's voice carrying from the waiting area. She was on the phone, her tone pitched to that perfect frequency of tragic martyrdom. "Oh, I know. Susan, it is exhausting," Vivian was saying, sighing loudly. "Greg and I are here every day. We are basically living at the hospital. Allison? Oh, you know Allison. She is always so busy with her career. She pops in when she can, I suppose. But really, it is Greg and I doing the heavy lifting. It is hard being the primary caregivers, but family is family." I froze, my hand gripping the paper cup so hard it crumpled. I had been there for 4 hours straight. Vivian had arrived 10 minutes ago, checked her makeup in the bathroom, and then sat in the waiting room to make phone calls. She hadn't even stepped inside the room to look at Grandma yet. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk over there and tear the phone out of her hand and tell Susan, whoever she was, that Vivian didn't know what Grandma's oxygen saturation was, or which vein they were using for the diuretic drip, but I didn't. I was too tired, and I knew that if I caused a scene here, in the hospital where my grandmother was dying, Vivian would twist it. She would say I was hysterical. She would ban me from the room. So I swallowed the bile in my throat and went back inside, closing the door against the lies. 2 days before she died, there was a moment of clarity. The doctors call it terminal lucidity, a brief rally before the end. I was alone with her. The winter sun was setting, casting long, cold shadows across the linoleum floor. Grandma Margaret pulled the oxygen mask down slightly. Her breathing was shallow, rattling in her chest. "Allison," she whispered. I leaned in close, my ear near her lips. "I am here, Grandma." "Listen to me," she rasped. Her hand, cold and trembling, found mine and gripped it with surprising strength. "If my lawyer calls you, you answer. Do you hear me?" "I hear you," I said, stroking her forehead. "Rest now." "No," she insisted, her eyes wide and urgent. "The lawyer, and the box, the wooden box. Don't forget." "I have it," I whispered. "It is safe in my closet." She nodded, her eyes closing. the tension leaving her body. Good. You will need it. Don't let them erase you. She slipped back into sleep after that, and the conversation dissolved into the beep of the monitor. I didn't know it then, but those were the last words she would ever say to me. She passed away on a Tuesday morning. I was at work when I got the call. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I just walked into the supply closet, sat on a box of saline bags, and cried for exactly 5 minutes. Then I washed my face and went back to my patients, because that is what nurses do. The moment Grandma was gone, Vivian stopped being the grieving daughter-in-law and became the event planner. The funeral was not a farewell. It was a production. Vivian selected the most expensive funeral home in the city, a place with marble floors and chandeliers that looked more like a hotel lobby than a place of mourning. She chose the casket, mahogany with gold trim, without asking my father or me. She ordered arrangements of white lilies that cost thousands of dollars, filling the room with a scent so thick it was suffocating. "We want to honor her properly," Vivian told the funeral director, dabbing her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. "She was a woman of high standing. We need the platinum package." I tried to intervene just once. We were in the living room of my father's house, reviewing the program for the service. "I would like to give a eulogy," I said quietly. "I wrote something for her." Vivian stopped typing on her laptop. She looked up at me over her reading glasses, her expression one of pity mixed with disdain. "Oh, Allison, honey," she said softly, "I don't think that is a good idea." "Why not?" I asked. "She was my grandmother. I was the closest person to her." "Exactly," Vivian said, shaking her head. "You are too emotional. We all saw how unstable you were at the Christmas dinner. If you get up there and start crying or rambling, it will just make everyone uncomfortable. It is a solemn occasion. We need dignity." "I won't ramble," I said, my voice tightening. "I just want to say goodbye." "No," Vivian said firmly, closing the laptop. "Greg agrees with me. It is too much pressure for you. I will speak on behalf of the family. I have prepared a beautiful tribute that covers everything. You can just sit with the family and receive condolences. That is your job." I looked at my father. He was sitting in his armchair, staring at the television. "Dad," I asked, "do you really think I shouldn't speak?" Greg didn't look away from the screen. "Listen to Vivian. Allison. She knows how to handle these things. We don't want a scene." A scene. My grief was a scene. My love was an inconvenience. The day of the funeral was a blur of black fabric and polite murmurs. I sat in the front row, my hands folded in my lap, feeling like an imposter at my own grandmother's funeral. When Vivian took the podium, she looked stunning. She wore a black designer suit and a string of pearls. She stood tall, composed, the picture of strength. "Margaret was not just a mother-in-law to me," Vivian began, her voice trembling perfectly on cue. "She was a second mother in these last difficult months. As Greg and I cared for her day and night, I learned so much about her resilience." I stared at the floor. Greg and I cared for her. The lie was being spoken into a microphone, amplified for the 100 people in the room to hear. She was rewriting history in real time. She went on for 20 minutes. She talked about Grandma's love for gardening, which Vivian had actually hated. She talked about Grandma's recipes, which Vivian had thrown out years ago. And then she mentioned me. "Margaret loved all her family," Vivian said, glancing briefly in my direction. "Even her grandchildren who were far away, or too busy with their own lives to visit often. She always forgave their absence." I felt the blood drain from my face, the breath caught in my throat. Forgave their absence. She had just publicly absolved me of a sin I hadn't committed, effectively branding me as the neglectful granddaughter in front of everyone. I could feel the eyes of the congregation boring into the back of my neck. The whispers, "That's the granddaughter." The nurse, "You'd think she would have been there more." Such a shame. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream that I was the one who wiped her face, who held her hand, who knew she was scared of the dark in the hospital room. But I couldn't. I was frozen by the sheer weight of the gaslighting. It was so complete, so confident, that for a second, I wondered if I was the crazy one. Maybe I hadn't been there enough. Maybe I was selfish. After the burial, the family gathered back at the house that was now legally in limbo, though Vivian acted like she already owned the deed. There was a spread of food that cost more than my monthly rent. People milled around, drinking wine and eating shrimp cocktails. I stood in the corner, holding a glass of water, feeling invisible. Vivian clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. "I just want to thank everyone for coming," she said, "and I want to let the family know that we have already met with the family attorney, Mr. Finch. The will is standard. Margaret wanted everything handled simply and legally. Everything has been processed. There is no need for anyone to worry about paperwork or legalities. Greg and I will handle the distribution of sentimental items in due time." It was a dismissal. It was a command. Don't ask questions. I saw my cousin Sarah whispering to her mother nearby. I moved slightly closer, pretending to look at a painting. "It is sad, really," Sarah was saying. "Vivian told me Grandma didn't leave Allison much of anything, just some old trinkets. She said Grandma was hurt that Allison wasn't around at the end." "Well," her mother replied, sipping her wine, "you reap what you sow. Greg was the one who paid the bills, after all." I set my glass down on a side table. My hand was shaking. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. I walked out the back door without saying goodbye to anyone. When I got back to my apartment, the silence was deafening. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked into my bedroom and opened the closet door. I dug through the stack of sweaters on the top shelf until my fingers brushed against cool, smooth wood. I pulled out the box. It was heavy. The wood was dark cherry, polished to a shine, with a small brass latch. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding it in my lap. "If my lawyer calls you, answer." Vivian had said the family attorney handled everything. She had said Mr. Finch, but Grandma had mentioned a lawyer specifically to me. Was it the same person, or was there someone else? My head was throbbing. The exhaustion of the last few weeks, the sleepless nights at the hospital, the emotional battering of the funeral, crashed down on me. I reached for the latch, but my hand fell away. I was too tired. I was too scared. What if I opened it and found nothing? What if it was just old letters? What if Vivian was right, and Grandma had cut me out? What if I opened this box and confirmed that I really was nothing to her? The doubt Vivian had planted was rooting deep. That was how abuse worked. It didn't just hurt you. It made you question your own reality. Maybe I am the villain, I thought. Maybe I remembered it wrong. Maybe I wasn't a good granddaughter. I closed my eyes, clutching the box to my chest. I couldn't face it tonight. I couldn't face one more disappointment. "Not tonight, Grandma," I whispered into the dark room. "I can't do it tonight." I put the box back on the shelf, pushing it behind a stack of old nursing textbooks. I walked over to my dresser and picked up a framed photo I kept there. It was from my high school graduation. Grandma Margaret was standing next to me, her arm around my waist. I was beaming, holding my diploma, and she was looking at me, not at the camera, but at me, with a look of such fierce, unadulterated pride that it radiated through the glass. I traced her face with my thumb. "You loved me," I said aloud, my voice cracking. "I know you loved me." But as I stood there in the empty apartment, holding the picture of a dead woman, the voice in my head sounded small and unsure against the roaring narrative Vivian had built. I was alone. The funeral was over. The story was told. And in their version, I was just a footnote. I set my laptop in the center, flanked by my phone on the left, and a stack of crumpled bank statements on the right. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the frantic beating of my own heart. After the slap in the kitchen and the humiliating text messages, I could have curled up in bed and let the depression swallow me whole. That was what the old Allison would have done. But the Allison who had driven away from the family dinner was different. She was cold. She was analytical. She was a nurse who knew that you could not treat a disease until you identified the pathogen. I opened my laptop and created a new folder on the desktop. I stared at the blinking cursor for a moment before typing the name. Family, evidence. I picked up my phone first. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a strange, vibrating rage. I opened the group chat history. It was a digital graveyard of my self-esteem. I scrolled back, past the recent Christmas demands, past the funeral logistics, back into the years where I thought I was just being a good daughter. I started taking screenshots. Click. There was a message from Vivian 3 years ago. I know you were saving for that certification course, Allison, but Tyler's tuition for the PR program is due, and we are short. You are the only one working a steady job. Don't be selfish. Family helps family. Click. A message from my father. Greg, 2 years ago. Vivian is really upset you didn't come over to clean the garage today. She says you don't care about us. I need you to transfer $500 for her therapy bill to smooth this over. Click. A message from Tyler, my stepbrother. Hey, Mom said you would cover the deposit for my birthday party venue. It is $2,000. Send it by noon or we lose the spot. Don't mess this up for me. I read them again, dissecting them not with the heart of a daughter, but with the eyes of an investigator. The pattern was unmistakable. It was a cycle of demand, guilt, and extraction. Whenever I had something for myself, time, money, a moment of peace, they created a crisis to take it away. They used words like selfish, ungrateful, and cold as weapons to pry open my wallet and my schedule. I uploaded the screenshots to the folder, labeling them by date and theme: financial coercion, emotional blackmail, gaslighting. Then, I opened my banking app. This was the part I had been dreading. Money was the tangible proof of my stupidity. For years, I had told myself I was just helping out. I had told myself that because I lived alone and didn't have kids, I should support them. I filtered the transactions for the last 5 years. I opened a blank Excel spreadsheet. I created 3 columns: date, occasion, requester. I started typing. November 22nd, 2019. Thanksgiving groceries. Vivian, $450. March 10th, 2020. Tyler's car repair. Dad, $800. July 4th, 2021. Patio furniture for family BBQs. Vivian, $1,200. As I entered the numbers, a cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I remembered that patio furniture. I had paid for it because Vivian said it would be nice for when I brought a boyfriend over. I had never brought a boyfriend over. I had never even sat on those chairs. I typed in the tuition payments for Tyler's public relations classes he barely attended. I typed in the payments for Dad's credit card debt, which he swore was a one-time thing that happened 4 times a year. I typed in the cost of the expensive gifts they demanded, the loans that were never repaid, the deposits for parties where I worked as a servant. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I added a 4th column to the spreadsheet. I titled it, What I Gave Up. Next to the tuition payment, I typed, Critical Care Nursing Certification. Next to the patio furniture, I typed, Vacation to Cabo with nursing school friends. Next to the credit card debt payoff, I typed, Down payment for a new car. I looked at the screen. The rows stretched down, a long digital scar. I highlighted the amount column and clicked the auto-sum button. The number that appeared at the bottom of the screen made the air leave my lungs. $38,450. I stared at it. $38,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was a master's degree. That was my freedom. I hadn't just given them money. I had given them years of my life. I had financed my own abuse. I felt a wave of nausea, but I forced myself to keep going. I minimized the spreadsheet and opened the photo gallery on my phone. I found the picture I had taken in the bathroom mirror just days ago, the red swollen handprint on my cheek. I found a photo from 2 years ago, a picture of my wrist, purple and yellow, which I had sent to a friend saying I fell. I dragged them into the evidence folder. I looked at the screen, cluttered with the debris of my reality. The texts, the numbers, the bruises. It wasn't a messy family dynamic. It wasn't just a difficult stepmother. I opened a blank Word document. The white page stared back at me, bright and accusing. My fingers found the keys. I took a deep breath and typed in all caps. This is abuse. I stared at the words. This is not family being difficult. This is not me being sensitive. This is systematic financial and emotional abuse. The moment I typed the period at the end of the sentence, I burst into tears. They weren't the desperate, confused tears I had cried in my car so many times. They were different. They were the tears of a diagnosis. It was the relief of finally knowing that the pain in your side isn't in your head, that there is a name for it, and because there is a name for it, you can treat it. I sobbed into my hands, feeling the heavy mantle of guilt, the guilt of being a bad daughter, slide off my shoulders. I wasn't bad. I was a victim who had just woken up. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I wasn't done. A diagnosis required a treatment plan. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved months ago, but never had the courage to call. It was a counseling center downtown, distinct from the hospital network. "Hello, scheduling," a voice answered. "Hi," I said. My voice sounded thick, but steady. "My name is Allison Valdez. I would like to make an appointment with Dr. Hayes. I think I am in an abusive family dynamic, and I need someone to help me verify my reality. I need to know I am not crazy." "We can get you in on Thursday, Allison," the receptionist said kindly. "You are doing the right thing." I hung up and looked at the clock. It was late, but the hospital administration never really slept. I knew Vivian's playbook. I knew her next move. If I stopped giving them money, if I stopped showing up, she would not just be angry. She would try to destroy my credibility. She would call my workplace. She would tell them I was having a breakdown, that I was unstable, that I shouldn't be trusted with patients. She had done it to a neighbor once. She would do it to me. I opened my email client and composed a new message to the head of human resources at Brightline Regional Hospital. Subject: Personal matter. Preemptive notification regarding Allison Valdez. Dear Mrs. Gable, I am writing to you regarding a personal domestic situation that I am currently navigating. I am in the process of estranging myself from abusive family members, based on past behavior. I have reason to believe that these individuals may attempt to contact the hospital to file false complaints or spread misinformation regarding my mental health or professional conduct in an attempt to leverage my employment against me. I want to be proactive in stating that my professional performance remains my top priority. I have attached my recent performance evaluations and my shift records for your review. If any external calls come in regarding my status, please regard them as harassment and contact me directly. Sincerely, Allison Valdez, RN. I hit send. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever done. I was exposing my shame to my employer. But as the notification message sent appeared, I felt a surge of power. I had built a perimeter. I had fortified my walls. 5 minutes later, a reply pinged in my inbox. Dear Allison, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We take the safety and well-being of our staff very seriously. I have placed a note in your file that no personal information is to be released to callers, and any complaints from external parties regarding your character will be flagged and brought to me personally before any action is taken. You are a valued member of our team. Please let us know if you need additional support or security measures. Best, Sarah Gable, HR Director. I read the email 3 times. You are a valued member of our team. It was such a simple sentence, but coming from an authority figure, from the real world outside of Vivian's distorted reality, it felt like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. I looked back at the Word document on my screen. The cursor blinked at the end of the line. This is abuse. I sat there for a long time, the blue light of the screen illuminating the dark apartment. For 32 years, I had been an extra in their movie, a prop to be moved and used. But tonight, in the quiet of my kitchen, surrounded by spreadsheets and screenshots, I had done something revolutionary. I had believed myself. I closed the laptop, the snap of the lid sounding like the closing of a heavy book. The investigation was over. The verdict was in. Now, it was time for the sentencing. The beige armchairs in Dr. Hayes' office were designed to be comfortable, to swallow you up in their softness. But I sat on the edge of the cushion, my back rigid. It had been 3 weeks since the night I drove away from the family dinner. 3 weeks of silence from my phone, except for the barrage of angry texts from my father that I had archived without reading, and 3 weeks of feeling like I was floating in a strange, gravity-less void. Dr. Hayes, a woman with kind eyes and a patience that seemed infinite, looked at me over the rim of her glasses. We had been talking about the guilt, the crushing, suffocating guilt that woke me up at 3 a.m, whispering that I was a bad daughter, that I had abandoned my father to a wolf, that I should have just cooked the turkey and kept my mouth shut. "Allison," Dr. Hayes said softly, interrupting my spiraling explanation of why I felt responsible for my father's happiness. "I want to ask you a question, and I want you to answer it honestly, without thinking about what you should say." I nodded, twisting a loose thread on my jeans. "Okay. In your entire life, in that house, has anyone ever truly stood up for you? Has anyone ever prioritized your well-being over the family image?" I opened my mouth to say yes. Surely, my father had... Surely, at some point, he had defended me. But as I searched my memory, scanning decades of interactions like a microfiche, I came up blank. I saw my father looking away. I saw him pouring a drink while Vivian screamed. I saw him asking me to apologize.
"No," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "No one."
Then, a flash of memory sparked, a wrinkled hand pressing a $50 bill into my palm, a whisper in a kitchen while dishes clattered. "You are not a servant." A phone call on a snowy highway. "Don't be kind. Be smart." "Wait," I corrected myself, my voice gaining a little strength. "Grandma, my grandmother, Margaret, she saw me. She was the only one." "Doctor," Hayes smiled, a small, encouraging shift in her expression. "And what did she tell you about your value?" "She told me I wasn't trash," I said, tears pricking my eyes. "And she gave me a box." The session ended 10 minutes later, but the thought of the box followed me out to the parking lot and all the way back to my apartment. I had pushed it to the back of my mind and the back of my closet, buried under the trauma of the funeral and the chaos of my awakening. I had been so afraid that opening it would only confirm that Vivian had won, that Grandma had forgotten me in the end, just like Vivian said. But Dr. Hayes was right. Grandma had stood up for me. Would a woman who stood up for me leave me with nothing? I got home and walked straight to my bedroom. I didn't even take off my coat. I dropped to my knees in front of the closet, shoving aside the stack of old nursing textbooks and the bag of winter sweaters. My hand brushed against the cold, polished wood. I pulled it out. The box was heavy, made of dark cherry wood, smelling faintly of lavender and old paper, the scent of Grandma's house before Vivian remodeled it. I sat cross-legged on the floor, the box in my lap. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of hope and terror. "Please." I prayed to the empty room. "Please don't let this be empty." I unlatched the brass hook. It clicked loudly in the quiet apartment. I lifted the lid. At first glance, it looked like a collection of keepsakes. There was a string of costume pearls I used to play with when I was 5. There was a silver hair comb she used to wear. There were a few photos, loose, not in frames. I picked them up. They were all of me. Me as a baby. Me at my high school graduation. Me in my nursing scrubs, standing outside the hospital. A candid shot she must have taken or asked someone to take. Vivian had filled the hallway with pictures of Tyler and herself. Grandma had filled this box with me. But underneath the photos and the pearls, there was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with wax, old-fashioned and deliberate. On the front, in her shaky but elegant cursive, were the words, "For Allison, open only after I am gone." My hands were trembling so hard I could barely get a grip on the paper. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. Inside were 3 folded sheets of legal pad paper, covered in dense handwriting, and a small, heavy object wrapped in tissue paper. I unfolded the letter. "My dearest Allison, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have finally found the courage to open this box. I hope you didn't wait too long. I hope you didn't let them beat you down so far that you forgot who you are. I am writing this because I am old, but I am not blind. I have watched for 15 years as that woman turned my home into her stage and treated you like the stagehand. I watched my son, your father, become a coward who would rather keep the peace than protect his child. For that, I carry my own guilt. I should have fought harder for you when I had the strength. But I have spent the last 2 years of my life making sure I fight for you now." I stopped reading, wiping my eyes. The ink was slightly blurry through my tears. "Vivian thinks she is clever. She thinks she has managed me. She brings her family attorney around, a man named Finch who nods at everything she says. She thinks because I am old and sick, I just sign whatever papers they put in front of me. And I did. I signed them all. I let her believe she had won. But she doesn't know about Elena Harrell. 2 years ago, when I could still take the bus, I went downtown. I hired my own lawyer. Allison. Her name is Elena Harrell. She is not a friend of the family. She is not a golf buddy of your father's. She works for me. And now, she works for you. The will Vivian has is a decoy. It is an old draft. The real will, the legal, notarized, final testament, is with Ms. Harrell. In it, I have left the house at 420 Oak Street, the majority of my savings, and my shares in the family trust to you. I gasped. The sound sharp and loud in the room. The house? She left me the house. The house Vivian was currently renovating. The house Vivian was hosting parties in. I read on, my heart racing faster than it ever had during a code blue. However, there is a condition. I have instructed Ms. Harrell that these assets are for your independence. You are not to use this money to bail your father out of debt again. You are not to use this money to buy affection from people who only love you when you are serving them. If you use this inheritance to go back under Vivian's thumb, I swear I will haunt you. This is your escape. Allison, do not waste it. If they have treated you well after my death, if they have shared what they think is the inheritance fairly, then perhaps you can be generous. But if they have pushed you out, if they have lied about me, if they have treated you like a servant at my own funeral, then you go to Elena Harrell, you burn it all down. Enclosed is the key to my safe deposit box at 3rd Street Federal. The original documents are there, along with some jewelry I didn't want Vivian to get her claws on. The second copy is with Ms. Harrell. Be brave, my girl. You are the only good thing that came out of that house in the last 20 years. Love, Grandma. I set the letter down on the carpet. I felt lightheaded. The world had just tilted on its axis. For weeks, I had been mourning not just my grandmother, but the narrative of my life. I thought I was the loser. I thought I was the forgotten one. But the whole time, while Vivian was preening and plotting, Grandma Margaret had been playing a long game of 4D chess right under her nose. I reached into the envelope and pulled out the tissue-wrapped object. I unwrapped it. It was a small, flat silver key with a tag attached. 3rd Street Federal, Box 402. I sat there for a long time, holding the key in my palm. It was cold. Hard metal. It was real. This wasn't a fantasy. This wasn't a wish. It was a tactical nuke, and Grandma had just handed me the launch codes. The anger that had been simmering in my gut since Christmas didn't disappear. But it changed. It stopped being the hot, chaotic anger of a victim and cooled into something solid and sharp. It felt like steel. I scrambled up from the floor and grabbed my phone. I needed to secure this. I was done being careless. I placed the letter on the table and took high-resolution photos of every page. I photographed the key. I photographed the envelope. I logged into my email and sent the files to myself. Then I uploaded them to a cloud drive. Then I sent a copy to a secure work email address. I sat down at my laptop and opened a browser window. My fingers flew across the keys as I typed, Harrell and Finch, Law Group, Cleveland. The website popped up. It wasn't a flashy corporate site. It was clean, professional, and straightforward. Harrell and Finch, specializing in elder law, estate planning, and protection of vulnerable seniors. I clicked on the Our Team page. There she was, Elena Harrell. She looked to be in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense haircut. Her bio read, dedicated to ensuring that the final wishes of our clients are honored, regardless of family pressure. She was perfect. She was exactly the kind of person Grandma would have liked. I looked at the phone number on the screen. It was 7:30 in the evening. The office was closed, but I couldn't wait. I dialed the number. It went to voicemail. You have reached the office of Elena Harrell. Please leave a message. I took a deep breath. My voice, usually soft and apologetic, came out low and steady. Hello, Ms. Harrell. My name is Allison Valdez. I am Margaret Blake's granddaughter. I found the box. I have the letter, and I have the key. I paused, looking at the bruised reflection of myself in the dark window. I need to make an appointment immediately. My stepmother thinks she owns my grandmother's house. I would like to correct that. I hung up. I walked back to the closet and placed the letter and the key back into the wooden box. I locked the latch. Then, I took the box and shoved it deep under my bed, behind a heavy suitcase where no one would find it unless they were looking for it. I lay down on my bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in months, the knot of anxiety in my chest loosened. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone, even from the grave. Grandma was holding my hand, guiding me through the dark. Vivian was probably at the house right now, maybe picking out new curtains, maybe planning the next party where she would badmouth me to the neighbors. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully erased Allison Valdez. I closed my eyes and whispered into the darkness. Thank you, Grandma. I will read every word. I will find every dollar. And this time, I am not going to be quiet. I promise. I fell asleep with the ghost of a smile on my face, knowing that tomorrow, the war would truly begin. But this time, I had the heavy artillery. The conference room at Harrell and Finch had become my command center. On the mahogany table, Elena Harrell had spread out a large timeline, drawn in sharp black marker on butcher paper. It spanned the last 2 years of my grandmother's life, marked with red flags for every significant event. The date Grandma changed her will, the date she died, the date of the funeral, and the date Vivian filed the false paperwork with the county. I looked at it, and my nurse's brain immediately took over. I was no longer a daughter looking at a family tragedy. I was a clinician looking at a patient chart. In the hospital, when a patient comes in with complex trauma, you do not panic. You do not cry over the blood. You assess the damage. You check the vitals. You identify the source of the hemorrhage, and you apply pressure. For 30 years. I had been panicking. I had been trying to put Band-Aids on a severed artery, thinking that if I just cooked enough turkeys or cleaned enough floors, the bleeding would stop. It never stopped because the wound was infected, and the infection was Vivian. Here is the anatomy of the case, Elena said, tapping the timeline with a pen. We have the original will. We have the letter of intent. We have the proof of assets. The law is on our side, but the law is slow, and Vivian is fast. She acts on impulse and intimidation. She acts like a virus, I said, the metaphor coming easily. She invades a host, drains its resources, and then rewrites the genetic code to serve herself. That is what she did to my father. That is what she tried to do to Grandma. Elena nodded, appreciating the analogy. Then we administer the antibiotic. We are going to file the real will with the probate court on Monday morning. That is the formal procedure. But to stop her from liquidating the accounts or damaging the house over the weekend, we need to serve her with a notice of contest. We need to freeze the field. If we serve her today, I said, tracing the line to the date of the party, She will cancel the engagement party on Saturday. She will lock the doors and claim I am trespassing. She will spin the story before we can even open our mouths. Exactly, Elena said. Which is why we do not serve her today. We wait. We let her think she is safe for 48 more hours. I opened my bag and pulled out the thick binder I had organized the night before. It contained everything from my family evidence folder. I had printed out the text messages where Vivian called me trash. I had the spreadsheet detailing the $38,000 I had given them. I had the emails from HR at my hospital confirming my stability. I had the notes from my therapy sessions describing the panic attacks. I slid the binder across the table to Elena. This is the patient history, I said. Everything, every dollar, every insult, every threat. If she tries to say I am mentally unstable, this proves a pattern of systematic abuse dating back a decade. It proves she gaslit me to hide the extortion. Elena opened the binder, her eyes scanning the first page of the spreadsheet. She looked up, her expression grim but satisfied. This is excellent, Allison. This isn't just feelings. This is forensic data. I can use this to argue that any delay in transferring the estate puts you at risk of further financial harm. It establishes urgency. We spent the next 2 hours mapping out the surgery. We identified the risks. Risk 1. Greg creates a scene and tries to guilt me into backing down. Countermeasure. I do not engage with Greg. I speak only to the facts. Risk 2. Vivian calls the police. Countermeasure. Elena has the deed and the probate filing ready to show the officers. We are the legal owners. Vivian is the squatter. Risk 3. I lose my nerve. That was the biggest variable. Me. I need to be sure, Elena said, looking at me seriously. When we walk into that party, it is going to be ugly. It is like lancing a boil. The pressure has to come out. Can you stand there and watch it happen without trying to fix it? I have held the hands of mothers while they watched their children die, I said, my voice flat. I have performed CPR on a man for 45 minutes knowing he was already gone. I can handle Vivian Morris screaming at me. Good, Elena said. Then here is the final piece of the prep. I am going to send a courier to Vivian's family lawyer this afternoon. It will contain a very vague, standard notice that the Blake estate is under review regarding a minor clerical error in the filing. It is just enough to make them pause, but not enough to alarm them. They will think it is a typo. It will keep them distracted until Saturday. I left the office with a sense of calm that was almost frightening. I went straight to the hospital, but not to work. I went to the scheduling office. I need to confirm my time off for this weekend, I told the head nurse, a woman named Sarah who had always been kind to me. You are on the schedule for Saturday night. Allison, Sarah said, checking the screen. You usually take the holiday shifts so the parents can be home. Not this time, I said. I need Saturday off, and Sunday, and Monday. I have arranged a swap with Mark in the ER. He agreed to take my shifts. Sarah looked surprised. I was the reliable one, the one who never said no. Is everything okay? Yes, I said. I just have a family commitment that I can no longer miss. I didn't offer an explanation. I didn't apologize for the inconvenience. I just stated the fact. It felt strange, like using a muscle I hadn't exercised in years. My next stop was Dr. Hayes's office for my scheduled session. This wasn't therapy today. It was training. Let's role play, Dr. Hayes said. I am your father. I am standing in front of you, looking sad and disappointed. I say, Allison, how could you do this to us? We are family. Why are you ruining Tyler's big day? I took a breath, the old instinct to explain, to say I am sorry, Dad, but Vivian hurt me, surged up. I pushed it down. I am not ruining anything, I said clearly. I am claiming what is legally mine. If you have questions, you can speak to my lawyer. Good, Dr. Hayes said, but you are still defending yourself. You said I am not ruining anything. That is defensive. Try again. Short, factual. My lawyer will answer your questions, Dad. Better, Dr. Hayes said. Now I am Vivian. I am screaming, you ungrateful brat. after everything I did for you." I looked at the empty chair Dr. Hayes was gesturing to. I imagined Vivian's face, twisted in rage. "I do not accept being spoken to like that anymore," I said. "Step aside." "Excellent," Dr. Hayes said. "Remember the acronym JADE. Do not justify, do not argue, do not defend, do not explain. You are not asking for permission. You are delivering information." By the time I left her office, I felt like I was wearing armor. But armor is heavy, and I knew I couldn't carry it entirely alone. I went home and did something I had never done. I invited my neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, and my friend from nursing school, Jen, over for tea. I sat them down and told them the truth. Not the watered-down version where I said my family was complicated, but the real version. I told them about the slap. I told them about the money. I told them about the will. "I am telling you this," I said, looking at Jen, "because when this blows up on Saturday, Vivian is going to try to tell everyone I had a psychotic break. She is going to try to isolate me. I need you to know the truth so I have a safe place to land." Jen reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "I have hated that woman for 10 years. Allison, I am just glad you finally see what we see. If she comes near you, I will file a restraining order on your behalf." Mrs. Higgins, a retired teacher who had known me since I moved in, nodded grimly. "You do what you have to do, dear. If you need a place to stay where they can't find you, my guest room is ready." It was a safety net. I had secured the legal front, the professional front, and the social front. I had closed all the exits. There was only one way forward now. On Friday night, the eve of the party, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom. The dress I had chosen hung on the door. It wasn't the kind of dress Vivian usually approved of. Demure, pastel, fading into the background. It was a deep, structured navy blue sheath dress. It looked professional. It looked powerful. It looked like something the owner of an estate would wear, not the help. I touched my cheek. The bruise from the slap had faded to a faint, yellowish shadow that was easily covered with concealer, but I could still feel the ghost of the impact. I remembered the heat of the kitchen. I remembered the feeling of total powerlessness as my father looked away. I let the memory wash over me, but I didn't drown in it. I used it. I distilled it into fuel. My phone buzzed on the dresser. It was a text from Greg. "Dad, make sure you arrive by 4 tomorrow. Vivian needs help with the floral arrangements before the guests arrive at 6. Don't be late again." He was still doing it, even after I'd walked out, even after the slap. He was still trying to slot me back into the machine. He thought if he just pretended everything was normal, I would fall back in line. I didn't reply. I didn't feel the urge to. I looked at the reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the tired, scared girl who sat in her car in the snow. She was a woman who had built a case. She was a woman who had a team. She was a woman who had a key to a safe deposit box and the ghost of a matriarch standing at her shoulder. "If you call me trash tomorrow," I whispered to the empty room, "you will be doing it in my house." I picked up my phone and opened the folder marked Family, Evidence. I scrolled through it one last time, ensuring every file was backed up, every photo clear. Then I turned the phone off completely. I needed to sleep. I needed to be rested. Tomorrow wasn't a party. It was an operation, and I was the lead surgeon. The driveway to 420 Oak Street was lined with cars. Luxury sedans and SUVs parked bumper to bumper on the grass my grandmother used to yell at us for stepping on. I parked my Honda Civic 3 blocks away, under the flickering light of a street lamp, and walked the rest of the distance. The cold night air bit at my exposed ankles, but I didn't feel it. My adrenaline was running too high, a hot, humming current beneath my skin. When the house came into view, I actually stopped walking for a moment. It wasn't Grandma's house anymore. In the 3 months since her funeral, Vivian had completed her renovation. The warm, yellow siding that I associated with summer afternoons and lemonade was gone, replaced by a stark, aggressive slate gray. The overgrown rose bushes Grandma had tended for 40 years had been ripped out, replaced by rigid, symmetrical boxwood hedges that looked like plastic. Floodlights washed the facade in a blinding white glare, erasing the soft shadows of the porch where I used to sit and read. It looked like a mausoleum. It looked like a corporate headquarters. It looked like Vivian. I took a breath, smoothing the fabric of my navy blue dress. It was a sheath dress, structured and professional, the kind of thing a woman wears to a board meeting, not a family party. I wasn't here to blend in. I wasn't here to fade into the wallpaper. I walked up the steps and pushed the front door open. The noise hit me first, a wall of chatter, laughter, and the clinking of crystal, overlaid with smooth jazz playing from a high-end sound system. The entryway, once cluttered with Grandma's coat rack and umbrella stand, was now an open-concept expanse of white marble and mirrors. And everywhere, there were photos. Vivian had curated the walls like a museum exhibit dedicated to the glory of her son. There was Tyler playing football, Tyler graduating, Tyler and his fiancée, Jessica, posing on a beach in Malibu, Tyler. There was not a single photo of Grandma Margaret. It was as if she had never existed in the house she had built. It was a spiritual eviction. I stepped further inside. The house was packed. There were probably 60 people there. Vivian's business partners in expensive suits, Jessica's wealthy family from Connecticut, and a handful of my father's relatives who looked slightly uncomfortable in their stiff clothes. Usually, when I walked into a family party, I went straight to the kitchen. It was a reflex, a conditioned response like Pavlov's dog. I would find the apron, find the sink, and start working. Tonight, I walked to the bar. "Sparkling water with lime, please," I told the bartender, a young man in a black vest who didn't know me. He handed me the glass. I turned around and faced the room, holding the drink at chest level. I stood there, occupying space. I didn't offer to take anyone's coat. I didn't scan the room for empty glasses to clear. I just stood there. It took about 3 minutes for Vivian to spot me. She was holding court near the fireplace, wearing a champagne-colored gown that shimmered under the new recessed lighting. She looked over the shoulder of a man she was talking to, and her eyes landed on me. Her smile didn't drop, but it froze. It became a rictus of tension. She excused herself and glided toward me, cutting through the crowd like a shark through water. "Well," she said when she reached me, her voice pitched high and bright, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Look who finally decided to grace us with her presence. The guest of honor has arrived." The sarcasm was thick, dripping from every syllable. "Hello, Vivian," I said. My voice was calm. Dr. Hayes had practiced this with me. Low center of gravity, eye contact. Do not apologize. "I see you managed to find a dress," she said, her eyes raking over my outfit, looking for a loose thread, a stain, anything to criticize. She found nothing. "It is a bit office appropriate for a celebration, isn't it? But I suppose it is the best you have." "It is comfortable," I said. "Where is Dad?" "Oh, Greg is around," she waved a hand dismissively. "He is entertaining the investors. You know, the people who actually contribute to this family's success." Greg appeared a moment later, emerging from the crowd with a scotch in his hand. He looked tired. His face was flushed, his tie slightly askew. When he saw me, his eyes darted to Vivian, checking her temperature before he dared to speak to his daughter. "Allison," he said, offering a weak smile. "You made it. We were worried you... well, with the work schedule and everything." "I am here, Dad," I said. "How is the hospital?" he asked, grasping for a safe topic. "It is busy," I said, "but I took the weekend off." "You took the weekend off?" Vivian interrupted, her eyes narrowing. "That is interesting, because when I asked you to come early to help with the floral arrangements, you didn't answer my text. I assumed you were working." "I was busy," I said, "but not with work." Vivian's jaw tightened. She stepped closer, invading my personal space, turning her back to the room so only I could see the venom in her expression. "Come with me," she murmured. "The catering team is having an issue with the staging in the kitchen. I need you to show them where the extra platters are." I don't know where the platters are. Vivian, I said, not moving. You remodeled the kitchen, remember? Don't play dumb with me, she hissed, grabbing my elbow with a grip that was like a vice. She pulled, and I let her lead me a few steps away from the main cluster of guests, toward the hallway that led to the kitchen. Now, walk. She marched me into the kitchen. It was chaos. Waiters were rushing back and forth with trays of hors d'oeuvres. The new chef she had hired was shouting orders. Vivian dragged me into the pantry, a walk-in space that used to be Grandma's sewing room, and spun me around. "Who do you think you are?" she whispered, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Walking in here like you own the place? Standing around drinking water while I have 100 guests to manage?" "I am a guest, Vivian," I said. "That is what guests do." "You are not a guest," she snapped. "You are family. And in this family, you earn your keep. Now, listen to me. Once the main course is served, I am sending the serving staff home to save on the hourly rate. I need you to handle the cleanup and the coffee service for the dessert hour. I already told the agency you would step in." I looked at her. I looked at this woman who had spent 15 years turning me into a servant in my own home, and I felt nothing. No fear, no guilt, just a cold mathematical understanding of her pathology. "No," I said. Vivian blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said no," I repeated. "I am not clearing the tables. I am not serving the coffee. And I am definitely not cleaning up. I am a guest at my brother's engagement party. If you wanted to save money on the catering staff, you should have budgeted better." Vivian's face turned a splotchy, ugly red. "You ungrateful little bitch," she spat. "After everything I have done, I let you come here. I let you be part of this. You have no position in this house outside of this kitchen. Do you understand? You are nothing without us." "Actually," I said, my voice dropping lower, forcing her to lean in to hear me, "I think we need to talk about positions. Did you really think Grandma left you the house, Vivian?" She froze. Her eyes flickered. "What are you talking about?" "The will," I said. "The real one. The one drafted by Elena Harrell 2 years ago. The one that is currently sitting in a safe deposit box at 3rd Street Federal." For a second, pure terror flashed across her face. It was the look of a person who realizes the ground they are standing on is trapdoor. But Vivian was a fighter. She immediately walled it off with denial. She let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. "Oh my God," she said, shaking her head. "You are insane. You are actually insane. Is this what you have been doing? Making up fantasies? Grandma used the family lawyer. Allison, Mr. Finch, everyone knows that." She pushed past me, throwing the pantry door open. She walked back into the kitchen, shouting over the noise of the chefs so that everyone could hear. "My stepdaughter is having an episode. Everyone," she announced, gesturing wildly at me. "Please ignore her. She is confused. She thinks she found a secret treasure map or something. It is sad, really." The chefs looked down, uncomfortable, but the door to the hallway was open, and several guests, including my Aunt Linda and Uncle Mike, were standing right there. They heard it. I walked out of the pantry. "I am not confused, Vivian, and I am not imagining the $38,000 I have transferred to you over the last 5 years. I have the spreadsheets." Vivian stopped. She turned around in the hallway, right in front of the guests. Her face was a mask of cruelty. "Spreadsheets?" she mocked. "You are delusional. You are a sad, lonely girl who is jealous of her brother's happiness. So you are inventing stories to make yourself feel important. You are trashing this party. Allison, just like you ruin everything." "Rashing?" Aunt Linda whispered to Uncle Mike. "Did she say trashing?" "Trash," Vivian corrected. Hearing her, she looked at me, her eyes dead. "She is trash. She has always been trash. Living off my husband's charity. Living off this house." Tyler appeared from the living room, looking annoyed. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my car. "Mom, what is going on?" he asked, looking at the gathering crowd in the hallway. "Why are you yelling? Jessica's dad is asking where the champagne is." Your sister is making a scene, Vivian said, pointing an accusing finger at me. She is refusing to help, and now she is sprouting nonsense about secret wills. She is trying to ruin your night. Tyler. Tyler looked at me with deep exasperation. Seriously? Allison? Now? Can you just not be yourself for one night? Just go in the kitchen and help Mom so we can get back to the party. You are embarrassing me. I am embarrassing you? I asked, looking at my stepbrother. She just called me trash in front of our aunt, and you are worried about the champagne? She is stressed, Tyler shouted. Stop being so sensitive. God, you are so selfish. Just do what she asks. My father drifted into the circle. He held his glass of scotch like a shield. Dad, I said, looking at him. Tell them about the will Grandma mentioned to you. Greg looked at his shoes. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. Allison, honey, he mumbled. Don't start this. Vivian is the lady of the house. We just want a nice evening. Why do you have to complicate things? The silence that followed was deafening. It was the final betrayal. He had chosen his comfort over my truth for the last time. Vivian smiled. It was a triumphant, predatory smile. She thought she had won. She thought the combined weight of their social pressure would crush me back into submission. She stepped forward, emboldened by the audience, and grabbed my wrist. She squeezed hard, her nails digging into the sensitive skin of my inner arm, right where the bruise had been weeks ago. You hear that? She hissed, leaning in close, her voice a low growl that carried through the sudden quiet of the hallway. Your father knows. Your brother knows. Everyone knows. In this house, you are nothing. You are the help. You are trash. And you will go into that kitchen and wash the dishes, or I will have security throw you out into the street where you belong. Don't think that nursing degree makes you special. You are still just the little orphan girl we took in. The physical pain of her nails was sharp, but the clarity in my mind was sharper. I looked down at her hand gripping my wrist. Then I looked up, meeting her eyes. I didn't pull away in fear. I pulled away with disgust, ripping my arm from her grasp with a force that made her stumble back in her high heels. Do not touch me, I said. My voice wasn't a scream. It was a projection. It was the voice I used to command a trauma room. It carried over the music, over the chatter, silencing the entire entryway. The guests in the living room turned. The conversation died. This is the last time, I said, enunciating every word. This is the last time you will ever call me trash without paying the price for it. Vivian stared at me, mouth slightly open, shocked by the volume, by the audacity. What are you going to do? She laughed nervously, looking around for support. Sue me? I don't have to, I said. The room was holding its breath. The air was thick with the static of a storm that had finally broken. Aunt Linda was staring at me with wide eyes. Tyler looked furious but uncertain. Greg was pale. And then it happened.
Ding dong.
The doorbell rang. It was a cheerful, bright sound that cut through the tension like a knife. Vivian frowned. Who is that? The guests are all here. She looked at the door, then at me. A flicker of genuine unease crossed her face. I didn't move. I didn't look at the door. I kept my eyes locked on Vivian. I think, I said softly, that is for me. The waiter opened the heavy oak door. A gust of cold wind blew in, carrying a few snowflakes. Standing on the threshold was not a late guest. It was a woman in a heavy wool coat, holding a leather briefcase. Behind her stood 2 uniformed police officers. Elena Harrell stepped into the light of the entryway. Her eyes scanned the room, the shocked guests, the terrified Greg, the furious Vivian, and finally landed on me. She gave me a small, imperceptible nod. Good evening, Elena said, her voice projecting clearly into the silent room. My name is Elena Harrell. I am the attorney for the estate of the late Margaret Blake. Vivian's face went the color of old ash. The glass of champagne in her hand tipped, spilling liquid down the front of her expensive gown, but she didn't even notice. The party was over, The surgery had begun. The young waiter pulled the heavy oak door open, revealing the figure standing on the front porch. It was Elena Harrell. She looked like a judgment from on high, wrapped in a thick charcoal wool coat, her leather briefcase clutched in a gloved hand. Behind her, the two police officers stood with their hands resting on their belts, their presence a stark, silent enforcement of her authority. Vivian recovered from her shock faster than I expected. She set her empty champagne glass on a passing tray and marched toward the door, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble floor. "Excuse me," Vivian announced, forcing a tight, incredulous smile. "This is a private event. You are interrupting a family celebration. I am going to have to ask you to leave immediately." Elena didn't even blink. She stepped over the threshold, forcing Vivian to take a step back to avoid a collision. "I am not here for the party, Mrs. Morris," Elena said. Her voice was calm, projecting effortlessly into the high ceilings of the foyer. "My name is Elena Harrell. I am the attorney representing the estate of the late Margaret Blake. I am here regarding the disposition of this property and to speak with the legal heir, Allison Valdez." A collective gasp rippled through the room. The chatter in the living room died instantly. The mention of Margaret's name acted like a spell, freezing the older relatives in place. They looked at one another, confusion and sudden apprehension dawning on their faces. "That is nonsense," Vivian snapped, her voice rising an octave. "We have already settled the estate. We worked with the family attorney. Mr. Finch, this is harassment. Greg, call security." My father, Greg, stood frozen near the fireplace. He looked at the police officers, then at Vivian, and finally at me. He didn't move. Elena walked past Vivian to a large console table in the center of the hallway. She set her briefcase down with a heavy thud and clicked the latches open. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. "Mr. Finch handles your husband's corporate contracts, Mrs. Morris," Elena said, pulling out a stack of documents bound in blue folders. "He does not represent Margaret Blake. I do, and the document you filed with the county based on a 10-year-old draft is invalid." She held up a document with a red seal. "This is the last will and testament of Margaret Ellen Blake, drafted and notarized 2 years ago. It revokes all previous wills." Elena looked around the room, making eye contact with the stunned guests. "I apologize for the disruption, but my client, the executor, has been blocked repeatedly from contacting the beneficiaries by Mr. and Mrs. Valdez, who claimed Allison Valdez was mentally incapacitated. Since I see Allison standing here, perfectly lucid, I am forced to deliver the news in person." Vivian lunged forward. "You cannot just read that here. This is illegal." One of the police officers stepped forward, interposing himself between Vivian and the table. "Ma'am, step back. Let the lady speak." Vivian stopped, her chest heaving, her face a mask of fury. Elena opened the document. "Article 4, she read aloud, her voice clear and unwavering. "I hereby devise and bequeath my primary residence, located at 420 Oak Street, to my granddaughter, Allison Valdez, absolutely." The silence that followed was absolute. Tyler dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, but no one moved to clean it up. "The house?" someone whispered. "She left the house to Allison?" "Furthermore," Elena continued, 70% of the remaining financial assets, including the family trust shares, are left to Allison Valdez. 10% is left to Gregory Valdez. A fixed sum of $5,000 is left to Tyler Morris." Elena looked up, her eyes locking on Vivian. "And regarding Vivian Morris, the will states, I intentionally make no provision for Vivian Morris, not out of oversight, but due to the sufficient assets she possesses in her own right." Vivian let out a strangled sound, like she was choking. "This is a lie. She is lying. Margaret was senile. She didn't know what she was signing." "On the contrary," Elena said, pulling out a second document. "Margaret anticipated you would say that, which is why she included a competency evaluation from her neurologist, dated the same day the will was signed. She was of sound mind." Elena then picked up the letter I had found in the box. And she left a letter of intent. She wrote, "I fear that after I am gone, my daughter-in-law Vivian will attempt to push Allison out of the family and rewrite history to make herself the victim. I am leaving my assets to Allison not just as an inheritance, but as a means of escape. I do not want my granddaughter to live one more day as a servant in the house I built." I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but I didn't wipe it away. I stood tall, watching the words land on the guests like physical blows. My Aunt Linda put a hand over her mouth, looking from me to Vivian with horror. "This is ridiculous!" Vivian shrieked, her composure fracturing completely. "Allison is unstable. She is having a breakdown. We were trying to protect her. That is why we handled the money." "Is she?" Elena asked. She reached into her briefcase again. "Because I have here a sworn affidavit from the Human Resources Director at Brightline Regional Hospital confirming that Allison is a top-rated critical care nurse with a spotless record. And I also have this." She held up a blown-up printout of a text message chain. It was the one from Christmas. "This is a text from you, Mrs. Morris, to Allison." Elena read, "You are trash living off this house. If you don't cook the dinner, don't bother coming home." And here's another one. "If you tell anyone about the money, I will call your hospital and tell them you are stealing drugs." The room erupted. The wealthy in-laws of Tyler's fiancée looked horrified. Jessica pulled her hand out of Tyler's grip and stepped away from him. "And here's a text from Gregory Valdez," Elena continued, holding up another sheet. "Just sign the waiver, Allison. Let Vivian have the house for peace. You know how she gets. Don't be selfish." My father crumbled. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. He couldn't look at anyone. "As of this morning," Elena announced, her voice ringing with finality, "I have filed an emergency motion with the probate court. All assets related to the Blake estate are frozen. The bank accounts are locked. And this house," she gestured to the walls Vivian had just painted, "is legally the property of Allison Valdez. Any unauthorized renovations or events held here without her permission are technically trespassing." Tyler looked at his mother, his face pale. "Mom, you said the house was ours. You said this was my wedding gift." "It is ours," Vivian screamed, her eyes wild. "She stole it. That little ungrateful brat manipulated a dying old woman." Vivian turned to me. The rage in her eyes was absolute. She lost all control. "You stole everything from me," she roared. "You ungrateful piece of trash." She raised her hand, rushing toward me, intent on striking me just as she had in the kitchen weeks ago. But she never reached me. Elena Harrell stepped forward, but before she could intervene, Uncle Mike, my father's brother, who had stood silent for years, stepped out of the crowd and caught Vivian's wrist in midair. "That is enough, Vivian," he said, his voice low and disgusted. "Don't you dare touch her." He shoved her hand down. Vivian stumbled back, panting, looking around the room for an ally, but there were none. The guests were looking at her not with admiration, but with revulsion. The mask had slipped, and the monster was visible to everyone. I stepped forward. The room parted for me. I walked until I was standing right in front of Vivian. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my hand. "I am not trash," I said. My voice was steady, clear, and cold. "And I am not your servant. From this day forward, every insult you throw at me, every threat you make, will be documented and added to the file. I am the legal owner of this house. I am the heir to Margaret Blake, and I will not be abused in my own home anymore." I turned to my father. He looked up at me, his eyes wet with tears of self-pity. "Allison," he stammered. "Please, it was a misunderstanding. The paperwork, it was complicated. We were just trying to keep the family together." I looked at him, and the last tether of guilt finally snapped. "You didn't want to keep the family together, Dad," I said. "You wanted to keep Vivian happy, and you were willing to sacrifice me to do it. You have a lawyer? I have a lawyer. Let them do the talking. I am done listening to you." Elena Harrell cleared her throat. I think it would be best if all guests who are not immediate family vacate the premises. We have legal matters to discuss, and the locks will be changed in the morning." It was a polite way of kicking everyone out. The guests didn't need to be told twice. There was a scramble for coats. Tyler's fiancée, Jessica, walked out the door without even looking back at him. Tyler stood alone in the center of the room, realizing that his inheritance, his wedding venue, and his status had just evaporated. Vivian stood by the fireplace, shivering, stripping the petals off a flower arrangement in a manic daze. She looked small, stripped of her lies. She was just a bitter, greedy woman who had overplayed her hand. As the room cleared, the silence returned. But it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of before. It was the clean silence of a storm that has passed. I walked over to the large bay window at the front of the room. Outside, the snow was falling again, coating the world in fresh, clean white. I touched the windowsill where Grandma used to keep her violets. I looked back at Elena Harrell. She was packing the documents back into her briefcase. She looked up and met my gaze. "You did good, Allison," she said softly. I nodded. A profound sense of peace settled over me. "Thank you, Elena." "From here on out," Elena said, snapping the briefcase shut. "Everything is written down. No more secrets, no more lies, just the truth." I looked at my father and Vivian one last time. They were arguing in hushed, frantic whispers in the corner, already turning on each other. They didn't matter anymore. They were tenants in my life, and their lease had just expired. "I think you should leave now," I said to them. "I have a lot of work to do to fix this house." I turned back to the window and watched the snow fall. For the first time in my life, I wasn't standing on the outside looking in. I was inside, warm and safe, holding the keys to my own future. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Allison's victory. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it.